And one German AI researcher is here in person as well. This is Professor Dr. Hans Uszkoreit, and we are really happy to have him back. He's a constant and very well-known guest also at the Rise of AI conference. He is specialized in language and knowledge technologies and was based in Beijing, and I recently learned, Hans, that you have still some boxes in Beijing.
Sorry, that I have what?
Some boxes, some cages.
Both, just to be polite. The second stage is opening now.
Sorry.
Both in parallel. So I recommend you, because it's overcrowded here too, to move over to give them the opportunity to open too. And then now you can continue, but give them the people 1 minute to go. Yeah, you both can start, it's wonderful.
I was so soaked in with Hans.
Do I need this?
Yes, you will need this.
Hans, you are thinking a lot about superintelligence. You are an expert on AI strategies, China, US, Europe, so you've worked on 3 continents and also researched on 3 continents. So what about commercialization? I mean, I hear a lot about research, and you are scientific director of many, many entities as well. So how about commercializing AI? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, although I started as a real researcher and research leader, actually we have done startups since 2000, several ones. I did several ones in Germany that I started, and also some in China, even in China. In the United States, I never started a startup, but many of my friends and colleagues have, so I know the scene there as well. Yeah.
So this is also one of your focus areas, actually.
Yes.
I have a huge list of your many, many functions and titles you are having at the moment. But today you want to talk about large AI models in a global perspective. That's true. So we are really curious to hear your perspective, and I'll be back after your presentation. Give him a hand. Warm welcome to Hans Uszkoreit.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful opening and for the introduction. Today I would like to talk about 2 things actually and bring them together. One is the general worldwide competition in artificial intelligence, especially between the so-called AI superpowers and our situation in Germany. And the second one is a new development in AI, these very large AI, especially language models, that they were with us already for a while, but in the public they were discussed quite a bit after GPT-3 was announced and shown in 2020. A lot went through the press. So GPT-3 is only one of these many models, and GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and I will in a moment just describe what that means. And it's a large language model, and it was the 3rd generation of this GPT model by OpenAI. So as I said, there were others, earlier ones like BERT by Google, Switch Transformer, Wudao. So those are neural networks that know language, the patterns of language so well that they can do many things. They can translate, they can generate, they can summarize text, they can answer questions. And so what makes them special is that they are very big and the way they are trained. So they have billions, sometimes even trillions of neurons, working neurons, actually of parameters that are set by the training, but that roughly corresponds also to the number of nodes. And they permit long inputs, not only individual short sentences, texts up to 2048 words, or even longer in the case of GPT-3, and they can also produce very long outputs. And the newest of these models, in addition to language, also have learned explicit knowledge from knowledge graphs or multimodal data, images or couplings of images and pictures, images and language. So we know this is what the miracles of AI. AI can look at something like this and then describe it. Yeah? So AI can now also go the other way around. There are already systems that take a language input and give you an image out that they either find or even construct. And what's special now about these language models, their input symbol vector is something that is either a speech recording, a sentence in German, a sentence in English, and so on. And they are trained on training data. Those are these labeled data. And so, for instance, something that extracts relation may extract the relation. Volkswagen has acquired a Europe car from a sentence like on the left. But it could also translate the sentence in the case of these large language models, or it may summarize it, make it shorter. And it can do many other things, can answer questions about it, and so on. So one of the central ingredients of these large language models is something that allows to link parts in the sentence that are different from each other. You know, also for images, there are mechanisms that link things in an image that are next to each other. For instance, layers of convolution networks. And here in this case, we call it attention mechanism. And the attention mechanism can work either by feeding the sentence piece by piece in, and then keeping parts in memory, keeping those important parts in memory that may link, are candidates for linking to later material, like in these sentences, where you need to do this. Or in the case of these newest language models, you can feed in the entire sentence, even long text, like up to 2,000 words, at the same time, and the system then learns from these stretches these attentions themselves. And there's a mechanism called self-attention that learns and produces additional layers that link kind of points that require these connections with later material. I cannot, during this talk, explain exactly how it works. The pre-training actually works in embarrassingly simple ways. It is not really that the system has to perform very difficult tasks. What we need is some tasks in which the data can be labeled automatically. That's called self-supervision. It's supervised learning, so you label data, but the machine labels these data. And it does it, for instance, by just taking out words of a text, or leaving sentences and text uncompleted and let the system complete. The system then, during learning, brute force tries to fill this task, fill in the left out words or complete sentences. And it does it because it's not a child, it's very patient, it doesn't get tired, it doesn't cry. It does it billions of times without complaining, and in the end, the weights of the neural system are set in a way to minimize the errors that the machine made in doing so. So, and then at some point, the machine can do miraculous things. You give the following input to GPT-3, the importance of being on Twitter, just like a title. Jerome K. Jerome, that's an author 150 years or longer ago, in a humorist, Three Men in a Boat, you may know, by Jerome K. Jerome. And then you say London, summer 1897, and now you let GPT-3 produce a text for that. And it produces a long text, a very complex text. And it does so, it describes Twitter, which Jerome K. Jerome has never seen, not knew about, in the style that Jerome would write. So it said, it's a curious fact that the last remaining form of social life in which the people of London are still interested is Twitter. So he writes funny things. I was struck with this curious fact when I went on one of my periodical holidays to the seaside and found the whole place twittering like a starling cage. Even this thing, twittering like a starling cage. This is absolutely amazing, creative way of dealing with language and writing this. So looking at it, you may think, this machine must have true intelligence. And even the creators of this machine, like Ilya Sutskever, the chief scientist of OpenAI, after a while stared at these things. He should know better because he understands the way very well, but he said, I think this thing has some form of human cognition, has real cognition in there. Of course it doesn't, yeah? It doesn't understand a single sentence. But it does things that humans can only do by understanding. So it can also answer questions like, what is the name of the Russian mercenary group? It says Wagner Group. And then sometimes it gives answers that are even too long. Yeah? You have to tell the machine then to make it shorter, like, where's the Wagner Group in Syria? Who's the leader? And then it rambles off about Dmitry Utkin, yeah, where he is, and so on. So, but you can make the machine be shorter or longer. Yeah, you can. So the GPT-3 model and similar models have many strengths. They are very good at text generation, at summarization, question answering, translation. But they are not very good in real multi-step inferences. When we do inferences that take several steps, logical steps, they cannot do it. They can do, if they have not seen already the answer, yeah, they cannot calculate in several reasoning steps. But otherwise, it's striking. So what was so special? I told you there were models like this before, but then is it the size now? More data, more training, more parameters? This is GPT-3 compared to the ones before. And I'll come back to exactly that point. What does it make? Is it really the size? Yes, in part it is. Yeah, it's the amount of data, because earlier ones were trained in similar ways. But what has happened since GPT-3? This is the big one. This has happened. Now GPT-3 is at the left side, and those are the newer ones. There are newer ones in China, in the US, Huawei in China, Wudao in Beijing, OpenAI, NVIDIA did new ones at Google, and now the good thing, even a German one. Yeah, so I don't know if Jonas Androulis, is he here? Ah, there he is. So congratulations to Aleph Alpha for this big step forward. So we now have, but in general, as you can see, this is the first and only one. Germany, in order to be fair, is not really, in most places, 99.9% of German companies and research units don't have access and not the means of doing that. Yeah, that's a singularity. So we are all used to American big companies being attached to AI, and in China there are similar companies to these. We know this is big in AI. But then, what's now the comparison between China, US, and Europe? I gave whole talks on it, but I found that this survey by the Center for Data Innovation that did an analysis arriving at almost exactly the conclusion I would have come up with. It compared the three main powers according to 6 criteria: talent, research, development, hardware adoption, and data. And it gave the following numbers, 44.6 and so on, as a sum of these points given to the individual criteria. And the US leads in talent, research, development, and hardware. China leads in adoption and data. Data is pretty clear. Why an adoption? I will come back to this in a moment. And the European Union, even with more than 500 million people, is not as good as the others, although we have a very strong. But this is maybe a little unfair, but right now, Europe is falling back. But if you look really at the application areas, you will see that Europe is not doing so bad in a certain subpart of AI that doesn't get the same popularity as internet AI and consumer electronics, which is manufacturing, enterprise administration, what is called enterprise AI. There will be several talks today about this topic. And so coming back to China, the special thing about China is that AI has entered daily life. When I lived there, there was food brought by a robot to the people in our building. There were traffic tickets in Beijing written completely by AI. There was the traffic in Hangzhou directed or controlled by AI. There was a complete artificial, this woman, this anchor woman in TV, reading every day. She moves and reads, but she's artificial. Yeah? She is completely not a human being. There is now in Shenzhen the first taxis, not as a test. They already can be used. They can be called, and they don't have a driver. And so there are these many things that you experience when you are there. Why are they so fast in doing it? Yeah, so that's the question. Let's go back to research for a moment and then come back to applications. Yeah? Go to research. In research, indeed, that's what we saw being in AI ourselves at conferences. China is now dominating in numbers the conferences. But now you can ask, those are numbers, by the way, that were compiled. Here they come from other sources, but they were compiled by colleagues of ours in Stanford called the so-called AI Index, led by my former boss at SRI, by Ray Perot. And they've been doing this for a while. It's a wonderful resource. You should use it, the AI Index in Stanford. So China's doing, but are these papers of good quality? Let's see, how often are they cited? Now we see, when we look at how much they are cited, China is not doing so well anymore, right? And especially now in the time of pandemics, it went down. So, but careful, look at the next slide. Chinese professors and scientists, they get points and jobs for journal papers, not so much for conferences. Let's look at journal papers. In journal papers, again, China is leading. But now look at citations. Oops, China is still very much ahead. So don't jump too fast to conclusion that this is all of lower quality. Lots of it is, lots of fast publications, but some of it is also very solid. Look at patent filings, for instance. China, we read it in the papers. China is filing all these patents. At our company, we needed to file patents for things that we would never patent in Europe, yeah, because the government wanted us to do that. So we needed to file these patents. But those are the patents granted. Did you see? Those are the patents filed. China, see China, United States, and those are the patents actually granted. Quite a difference, right? So the Chinese government found out that lots of this patenting does not really hit the spot and is ill-guided, and they are now trying to counterbalance it by a more reasonable publishing policy, but patenting policy. Let's come now to the weaknesses of Europe and Germany. Why are we weak? And it's not so much in basic research. I would come to that. Many brilliant ideas coming from basic research from Europe, but it is actually in taking it, not only commercializing, taking it to applications. Our problems are in 3 areas. One is the last area of application research. The other one is the first part of commercialization, risk capital. The first one is true success in application research. True success. We have many projects, but not true success. And the last one is scaling in the market, which is more in industrial. It has more to do with the fragmentation of the market, the relatively bigger size of the American and the Chinese market and so on. The other 2 are important, and the first one I would claim is the most important, and I would claim that the German government up to this point has not understood why the US is so successful there, but Chinese government has. So this is a simple fact. I know by talking to people from Chinese government, they have understood it very well, and I know by talking to people from German government, I'm pretty sure they have not understood it. So the first one, this is the important. True success in application research. So how did the US solve the problem of this last piece of mile? Yeah? That after first you have the competition in true research, publication of papers, people want to become professors, they publish a lot, they get cited and so on. Why do they fail on this last piece? Because it is a huge effort of collective effort, and you need to have competition and KPIs. People need to be interested in doing it. You need competitive research that is especially funded by the government. Industry cannot fill that. And the US solved it by originally solving a different problem, namely the problem to become the technological leader in the Cold War. In '57, when the Sputnik shock came and America was shocked that the that Russia became very successful. They started a funding scheme first with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Later, others followed. And also, they have regular research like NSF. But you will see later that this is not the important part. So, and the DARPA success stories include the internet itself, which was called ARPANET before, Windows, mouse, hypertext, GPS, conversational personal assistant, Siri, that was my former group at SRI, was first DARPA project and then became a spin-off. Automatic machine translation, the people who later worked at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, many of them were first in DARPA projects. Actually, even earlier they were in our German projects, but then they went to... and then autonomous land vehicles, drones, everything came out of DARPA. Why? Because they have the following ingredients of the success recipe. And the problem is, all of them are needed. You cannot take half of them. But to tell you the truth, the German research funding of applied research fails in all of these, unfortunately. The first one is formulation of strategic technology goals. Oh yeah, we have a research strategy. Oh, we come back at that, I will tell you later, which is different. Then have competitive R&D projects, not say, oh, this would be double funding if 2 projects do the same. No, they have to do the same. We need 3 or 4 doing the same thing in order to become good. Yeah? It's silly to think you should fund the same thing only once. It's absolutely silly. It's taking competition out of this type of research. The third one is to have infrastructure projects, big ones, that lead to GPS, to the internet. Or, for instance, I'll come back to this, to large language models. Then procurement is very important. The government buys applications, not just funds research. They are buying. DARPA and Department of Energy, Department of Health are buying things from small companies, and that helps the small companies' procurement. Then consequent funding until the goals are reached. In Europe and in Germany, they would say, oh, we have funded this topic for a while, now we need to fund something else. Yeah? We cannot always fund the same stuff. Yeah? We have to switch. And then the people who have worked on that go to the US and continue their work there. And highly competent planning and management by experts. DARPA is inviting for all of their program experts who stay with DARPA for a while. They will not follow because they go back to science. Yeah? They cannot be corrupted by the military, but they can also be not corrupted by the science because they are not, for that time, they are not taking any grants themselves. So this is very important. But look at this thing. This is really mind-boggling. Yeah? Down there you see the National Science Foundation, but this is AI contracts in the US in 2021. You see how little is from the research part? All of these things are DARPA, procurement, health, and so on. It's all kind of very directed government funding. This makes the difference. And then, of course, you get more private investment. Germany is much bigger. Yeah? That's clear, that we all know. So, but couldn't we do it as well? Yes, of course we could. Let's take 3 American success stories, 3 examples. Autonomous driving. In the 80s, Daimler was leading, yeah, and Volkswagen. They were really leading in autonomous driving. Was never carried out to the end because for industry it was too early and government didn't care too much. DARPA had the autonomous vehicle program, the autonomous driving program, so that somebody like Sebastian Thrun, a German, went to the US and as a Stanford professor became very good. He won the DARPA contests and later he started at Google to build up this area. Machine translation. The person who started Google Translate was Thorsten Brands. He came from my group. He hired Franz Och. He had also worked on our projects in Germany. And then the Macherei Brüder, the brothers Macherei, who came from the German projects, from our projects in Workmobile, mainly at Aachen, at Erlangen, and so. And then they started machine translation. And now we have Germans at Microsoft, at Google, everywhere. Yeah? Deep learning, the two most widespread types of neural networks are convolution networks and LSTMs by Jürgen Schmidhuber and Sepp Hochreiter. Jürgen is here today too. Go to his talk. But it was adopted and is in almost all applications. It came from Germany, yeah? But the business was not made in Germany. Take the 3 Turing Award winners there are 3 Europeans who were drawn to the US. And I did the following joke. I took the 50 most cited, or the 50 people who I recommend most often to my students to read up to deep learning, yeah? the whole history of deep learning. 50 people. Schmidt, of course, Jürgen is among them, and many others. And now, how many are from the US? The blue ones are from the US. But the US is leading, right? They're all coming from Europe. There are more Chinese and there are more Canadian, maybe, than US Americans, yeah? So this shouldn't be, I mean, if you work in this field, it doesn't come as a surprise, yeah? So this is brain drain. The flow of ideas happens mainly through brains, but also through scientific literature, through collaboration. And international collaboration shows the flow of ideas, because if the flow goes slowly from one country to the other, you will see that people also cooperate, yeah, from both sides. This is cooperations between different countries, United Kingdom and China, and so on. Germany appears only once. We are not so cooperative. We have many people, but are not so. So we are once with the United States, not surprisingly. Yeah, you see, cooperations. What's missing? Up there it says, excluding US and China. US and China, could it be because the US is so much against China that they cut off the cooperation? This is US and China up there, and those down there are the others. So the US is not as silly as some people in Europe stopping and ending this cooperation, but they are doing it every day in order to gain from it. Yeah? That's pretty clear. So then already were mentioned the national AI strategies, the first one in the US, then in China. But in Europe, Fabian already mentioned, we are much stronger, right? We don't have only one strategy. We have many. So we are much better. Many of these strategies. In Germany, we had a strategy in 2018. Angela Merkel at the Digitalgipfel announced 3 billion for AI. And we said, oh, that will be interesting. I wonder how they spend it, because actually I'm now maybe too old. I don't really believe in the effectiveness of the way of spending on applied research that is right now done. Yeah? So I was thinking, oh, 3 billion, I hope they don't waste it. I should have said, oh, 3 billion, let's spend it, yeah, but I was afraid. So then in 2020, Angela Merkel promised another 2 billion. In November 2021, Thomas Sattelberger, Free Democrat, I need to finish, right? A Free Democrat, but I'll do very fast. A Free Democrat Bundestagsabgeordneter, parliamentarian, asked the government, and 300 million by that time were spent. And even up to date, it's not more than 1 billion. So the whole thing is, but in the meantime, China went further. They had the they have the 5-year plan and the Innovation Competition Act, and in each of them, AI is number 1, yeah, for all the things. So our urgent need is, we in Germany urgently need an updated plan and a real strategy with goals, KPIs, yeah, and real competitive research projects, managed, supervised by experts, and we need infrastructure, because right now nobody can do these things. That's why at the German AI Association we got together and started an initiative called Large European AI Models, in which we are now pressing together with 400 AI companies and many, many other supporters. Look at all these supporters from industry. We are trying to put pressure on and say, let's create an infrastructure that gives us at least a chance to compete. And companies like Aleph Alpha, who is the forerunner, is also part of this initiative. So let me finish then. We are working in 3 steps. Pilot building first in a project that's already been funded, but that's much too little. Then we need the compute infrastructure. It's still not the 5 billion that's needed, yeah, that Angela Merkel, but it's more money. And then the creation together with our friends in other European countries. So let me finish with an upshot and outlook. A new generation of large AI models offered great prospects, really, everybody knows, yeah? And novel applications that were not possible before. USA and China have a clear lead in international competition also in this field. Europe with Germany, we are falling further behind. If we wait, we are really falling further behind all the time. But we still have immense chances. But we need public support. Maybe not as much as in China and the US, but at least what's promised, yeah? At least. And we need to try new models of AI innovation infrastructure and new funding instruments that are informed by the success stories in the US. And the question is, in the time of Ukraine war, pandemics, and many other things, is the German government able to grab this opportunity or won't they? That's my question.
That's a good question. I have the same. Stay with us, Hans. No, please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hans. Yeah. Very insightful. And I mean, I think we all have this question in mind. How can we stop the brain drain? And you had some recommendations. A lot about money, investments, and so on. Is there anything else that you...
No, but you mentioned the right things. First of all, in Germany, we have a law called the Besserstellungsverbot. So many research centers are not allowed to pay people what they would get in other countries because our salaries have to be in line with the salaries of civil servants in the ministries, yeah? So you can never get the good people. So that's one thing you need to. The second thing is, if you offer competitive environments in which people, not just projects in which you compare your results with a project plan that was made 3 years ago, but where you compare it really with others, yeah? Where you have real competition. Yeah. People, like in DARPA projects, people thrive, yeah? They like to work in them, yeah? Not because of DARPA, it has nothing to do with the military, yeah? It has to do with it. And the third thing is, you need, of course, an infrastructure. So many of the creative ideas in OpenAI and at Google, Facebook, and so also at Huawei and Baidu, they could not have come up if you have to apply for compute time at a big high-performance computing center. Yeah? You need this kind of... And if we have these ingredients, then I think we can keep our best people and maybe even attract people from other parts of the world, because Europe is a good place to live, right?
That was pretty clear. I mean, that you really believe in our ability in Europe to keep up with the US and China.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I think it's possible. I think we have to do it. It is not impossible. Yeah, it is. But there's no nature of law that says that the US has to be so much better than us. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Hans. Give him a warm applause.